At 3:40 in the morning, the forest was already below -30 degrees. Snow hardened along the roots of black pines until the ground felt like iron beneath a thin white crust. Every sound carried too far in the cold. Even breath seemed loud enough to betray a man. Leonid Petrov lay motionless beside a shallow drift where the patrol had halted only minutes earlier. The column had been 12 men when they crossed the frozen stream at 2:10, skis wrapped in cloth to silence the wood. Now there were only 4 shapes left in the darkness, and 2 of those no longer moved. The first burst of German automatic fire had come from less than 80 meters away, cutting across the trail at waist height. Snow sprayed upward in pale fountains. Someone shouted once. Then the forest swallowed the sound. Petrov had dropped flat without thinking, cheek against ice, fingers already searching for the bolt of his Mosin Nagant. He remembered counting 3 separate firing points by the rhythm: a lone one light machine gun to the left, 2 rifles forward, a prepared line, an ambush waiting for movement. The patrol commander never finished his warning. By the time silence returned, the man's map case lay open in the snow, pages stiffening in the cold. Petrov waited through a full minute of nothing. 60 heartbeats. He kept his face buried in the sleeve of his coat so the vapor of his breath would not rise. The forest did not move, yet danger remained close, patient, listening. Somewhere to his right, a wounded soldier tried to crawl. The sound was small, but clear cloth scraping against frozen crystals. A single German shot answered it. Then stillness again. Encirclement came slowly, almost politely. Petrov sensed it the way hunters feel wolves before seeing them. The firing line did not rush forward. No voices, no commands, only distance tightening in the dark. He turned his head 1 centimeter at a time. The snow near his rifle barrel glowed faintly blue from starlight. Beyond it, nothing but trunks and shadow. The remaining 2 Soviets lay 10 meters apart, both silent, both waiting for someone else to decide whether survival was still possible. Petrov understood the arithmetic without emotion. 4 men against an unknown number, deep behind German forward security positions. Temperature dropping toward -35 before dawn. Ammunition: 12 loose rifle cartridges in his pouch, 5 already in the magazine. 1 fragmentation grenade lost during the fall. No radio, no stretcher. No path back that the enemy did not already watch. Retreat as a group meant noise. Noise meant illumination flares. Flares meant machine gun fire at measured range. The forest would become a white killing ground within seconds. His fingers numbed despite the mittens. He forced himself to pause after each motion, counting slowly to 20 so the forest could settle again around him. No shot came. After 3 minutes, he reached the shallow depression where fallen branches formed a low shadow. From here, the trees thickened toward the north. The German line, he guessed, faced south and east toward the Soviet front. Behind them might still exist emptiness. He turned once more toward the wounded soldier. The whispering had stopped. Snow already gathered along the man's coat sleeve, softening the outline of his body. Petrov looked away. he began to crawl north. Each movement required decision. Lift the knee too high and crusted snow would crack. Push too fast, and breath would plume upward like smoke. He moved as slowly as drifting frost, pausing whenever the wind died, so silence remained unbroken. 10 meters became 20. The shapes of the ambush faded behind him, though he never allowed himself to believe he was unseen. The forest here dipped slightly downward, toward a frozen marsh. Bad ground for marching troops, good ground for slipping through. Then a flare burst into the sky. White light flooded the trees, turning every shadow black and sharp. Petrov flattened instantly, face buried in snow so bright it hurt his eyes even through closed lids. He did not breathe, he did not blink. The flare hissed as it drifted downward on a small parachute. Somewhere far behind, a German voice called once, uncertain. No answer followed. The light died, and darkness returned, thicker than before. Petrov remained still for another full minute. Only when the night felt whole again did he continue forward, inch by inch, toward the marsh. The ground softened beneath the snow crust, dipping under his weight with a faint, muffled sigh. Water lay frozen only at the surface here. Break through, and the cold would finish what bullets had not. He tested each placement with the rifle before shifting his body across it. Halfway through the marsh, he heard movement ahead. Not loud, just the slow rhythm of a man walking carefully. German patrol, close enough that Petrov could hear leather creak in the cold. He lowered himself completely into the snow, pressing flat until ice touched his lips. The footsteps stopped. Silence stretched thin. For a moment, he believed the sentry was looking directly at him. Seconds passed, and the steps resumed, angling away toward the east. The sound faded gradually until only wind remained. Petrov waited another count of 50 before moving again. Beyond the marsh, the trees opened into a narrow corridor where artillery shells had stripped branches weeks earlier. Moonlight reflected off untouched snow, leaving no cover except distance. Crossing it meant exposure for nearly 60 meters. Staying meant dawn would trap him behind the German line. Good for concealment, dangerous for orientation. Landmarks blurred into sameness. Time passed without shape, perhaps 1 hour, perhaps 2. The cold deepened until even thought slowed beneath its weight. Then he heard something impossible, human voice speaking Russian. Very faint, carried by wind from somewhere inside the ravine. Petrov stopped instantly, heart striking once hard against his ribs. Friendly survivors, or bait placed by men who understood desperation. The voice came again, weaker this time. A single word he could not fully hear. Petrov lowered himself to one knee and listened into the darkness, knowing that whatever waited below would decide whether this night ended in rescue or capture. Petrov remained motionless at the lip of the ravine until the wind shifted again and carried the sound upward a second time. The voice was weaker now, frayed by cold and distance, but it was unmistakably Russian. Not a shout meant to lure. Not the clipped accent of imitation. A man close to exhaustion, speaking because silence meant surrender. He did not answer. Instead, he studied the darkness below, letting his eyes adjust to the shallow depression where broken branches and wind-packed snow formed uneven shadows. If Germans waited there, they would expect movement from above, perhaps even a whispered reply. Patience, not hope, had kept him alive this long. 30 seconds passed, then 60. No sound of boots, no metallic click of a weapon being readied. Only the thin hiss of falling snow. Petrov slid forward on his stomach and began descending the slope 1 careful meter at a time. The ravine was no deeper than 3 meters, its sides rounded by old meltwater, now frozen solid. At the bottom, a darker shape lay half-covered by drifted powder. A soldier, Soviet winter coat. One arm twisted beneath his body. Petrov stopped 2 meters away and watched for movement in the surrounding trees. Still nothing. Only then did he whisper, barely louder than breath, "Don't speak. Nod if you hear me." For a moment, the figure did not move. Then, slowly, the man's head shifted once against the snow. Alive, Petrov closed the remaining distance and knelt beside him. The soldier's eyelashes were rimmed with ice, lips cracked, pale blue. A rifle lay nearby with the bolt missing, likely lost during the ambush. Blood had frozen dark along the lower leg, where cloth was torn. "How many?" Petrov murmured. The wounded man swallowed with difficulty. 3 went north. I fell. Petrov measured the words carefully. 3 others alive somewhere in the forest. Direction uncertain. Distance unknown, but not alone. He pulled a strip of cloth from inside his sleeve and tightened it above the wound, fingers working clumsily in the cold until pressure slowed the bleeding. Gah, gah. The man winced, but made no sound. "Can you stand?" A faint shake of the head. Petrov looked toward the tree line again. Dawn was still hours away, but the sky had begun the slow, invisible brightening that precedes it. They could not remain here. The ravine would become a trap once light revealed it. He studied the wounded soldier's gear canteen, half frozen, ammunition pouch nearly empty. Weight mattered now more than comfort. Survival meant movement. Petrov slid the man's arm across his own shoulders and lifted. Pain flickered across the soldier's face, but he managed to stay conscious. Together they began moving along the ravine floor, Petrov carrying most of the weight, boots sinking through soft crust with each step. Progress measured itself in breaths rather than distance. After perhaps 200 meters, the ravine curved eastward and narrowed between thicker pines. Snow lay deeper here, untouched by wind. Good concealment, bad for speed. Petrov paused beneath a low branch and listened. At first, he heard nothing unusual. Then, faint and far behind them, came the distant bark of the same dog. Closer than before, German trackers had found the ambush site. They would follow blood, broken crust, any sign of passage. The snowfall helped, but not enough. Dogs needed little to continue. Petrov felt no surge of fear, only calculation. "How long can you walk?" he asked quietly. The wounded man tried to answer, failed, then whispered, "Not far." Petrov nodded once, though the soldier could see it. The journey to Soviet lines still stretched several kilometers through uncertain ground. Carrying him the entire way would slow them until dawn exposure made both targets. Leaving him meant certain death. The arithmetic offered no mercy. Petrov shifted the soldier's weight higher and continued forward. The dog barked again, louder. They reached a fallen tree spanning the ravine like a low bridge. Beneath it, snow had drifted into a shallow hollow sheltered from wind. Petrov guided the wounded man down into that space and began working quickly with numb hands, pulling loose branches and powder over the opening until the shape disappeared into the natural curve of the drift. From 2 meters away, nothing remained but uneven snow. He leaned close to the soldier's ear. "Stay still. No sound." "Whatever you hear," the man's eyes opened slightly. Understanding passed between them without words. Petrov pressed his remaining cartridges, 6 of them, into the soldier's mittened hand, keeping only the 5 already in his rifle and 1 loose round in his pocket. Enough for delay, not enough for rescue. Then he rose and stepped back onto the ravine floor, deliberately leaving clear tracks leading east. The dog barked once more, now unmistakably near. Petrov began walking openly this time, no longer hiding his passage. Each step firm, visible, undeniable. A trail meant to be followed. After 50 meters, he climbed out of the ravine and angled southeast toward denser forest, increasing speed just enough to draw pursuit without appearing to flee in panic. Behind him, voices carried faintly through the trees. German, excited, certain, good. He moved for 10 minutes. Then 15, until the barking grew sharp and immediate. Branches snapped somewhere behind. They were close now. Close enough that any hesitation would end the chase too quickly. Petrov slowed near a cluster of boulders half buried in snow-walled glacial stone rising chest-high from the earth. Limited cover. Clear lines of fire. A place chosen not for survival, but for time. He stepped behind the largest rock and waited. The forest held its breath. The first German appeared between the trees at perhaps 40 meters, rifle raised, eyes scanning low across the snow. Behind him came the handler gripping the leash of a dark-coated dog straining forward. 2 more soldiers followed at wider spacing. For men, Petrov lifted his rifle, settled the sight just below the lead soldier's collar, and fired once. The sound shattered the silence like breaking ice. The man dropped instantly, momentum carrying him face first into the snow. The dog lunged forward, barking wildly. The others scattered for cover, returning fire in sharp, controlled shots that chipped stone and sent powder spraying around Petrov's position. He cycled the bolt, fired again. Another figure stumbled back behind a tree. Now they would believe they faced a desperate rearguard, not a single scout. Confusion bought seconds. Seconds bought distance for the hidden wounded man. Bullets struck the rock in hard metallic snaps. Stone fragments cut across Petrov's cheek, warm for an instant before freezing. He fired a 3rd time, then shifted position along the boulder's edge to suggest multiple defenders. German voices shouted coordinates. One began circling left, trying to flank. Petrov counted silently. Ammunition nearly gone, time nearly given. He waited until the flanking soldier exposed himself between 2 trunks and used his 4th shot. The man collapsed without a cry. Only 1 rifle answered now, firing cautiously from deeper cover. The dog's barking had turned frantic, confused by blood and echo. Petrov held his last cartridge in the chamber and did not fire. Silence stretched, broken only by drifting snow and the distant rasp of the wounded German trying to move. Minutes passed. No advance came. They were waiting for reinforcements, unwilling to rush an unknown defense. Good again. Petrov slid backward from the rock, keeping low, then disappeared into the trees opposite his original trail. Within seconds, the snowfall softened his new tracks. Within a minute, the forest swallowed him completely. He moved south without stopping. The cold now felt distant, almost unreal, replaced by the dull heaviness of exhaustion. Muscles trembled beneath layers of wool. Vision narrowed to the simple rhythm of step and breath. Yet the land ahead slowly changed, trees thinning. Ground rising toward a low ridge he remembered from briefing sketches days earlier. Friendly forward-listening posts sometimes lay beyond such ridges, or German ones. He climbed carefully, rifle ready, though empty. At the crest, he lowered himself flat and waited, listening in to the pale gray that signaled approaching dawn. Nothing. Then, very faintly, the metallic clink of equipment handled without carelessness, followed by a cough quickly stifled. Russian Petrov did not move at once. Certainty in war required proof. After a full minute, he whispered a recognition phrase given to scouts before patrol. 2 simple words carried no farther than 10 meters. Silence answered. Then the correct reply came back, equally soft. Only then did he allow himself to stand. Figures rose from shallow snow pits ahead, rifles lowering as they recognized the uniform, the face rimmed with frost, the eyes too tired to show relief. Hands reached to steady him when his legs nearly failed beneath sudden stillness. Others, someone asked. Petrov tried to answer, but voice would not form. He simply pointed back toward the forest.